You've found just stories, simple, heartfelt moments from real lives, stories that remind us how connected we all are through love, loss, and hope. Get cozy. The stories are about to begin. An early March evening, a leaden weight of clouds hung over the city, pouring wet snow mixed with rain onto the ground. Sticky, semi-liquid mud spread underfoot, causing passers-by to constantly lose their balance. Eleanor stepped carefully, attentively choosing the spot for each step. The last thing she wanted, in addition to all her misfortunes, was to slip on the slick slush and injure herself. Hospitals had become her second home as it was. What could she do? Years were taking their toll, and the diagnosis left no hope. They stopped, exchanging a few phrases. The former teacher was always pleased to hear about her students' successes. Look at Lydia. It turns out she's mastering the faculty of finance and economics, and even manages to work part-time. Clever girl, hard worker. Saying goodbye, Lydia hurried on her way, while Eleanor headed towards the shop. They were out of potatoes, and fresh bread wouldn't hurt. She'd buy a little of everything. How much does a lonely person need? Before, Eleanor, like all the women she knew, tormented herself with diets. But now she could quite afford an extra sweet bun or a piece of candy. But the taste of food seemed dulled. And in general, the very essence of her being had changed. Headaches began to plague her almost immediately after retiring. The send-off was solemn, at a table in the school cafeteria. Words of gratitude were spoken. Each colleague recalled something good. It was a little awkward, but moving to tears. At the time of her departure, Eleanor was only 60. It was scary to part with the staff in the school where she had taught history for almost 40 years. But there was no choice. Children were becoming more difficult. It was harder and harder to find an approach to them. In short, Eleanor didn't wait to be asked. Feeling that things were heading that way, she wrote the application herself. The newly minted pensioner took a long time to get used to the new routine. At first, she would wake up at 7 in the morning and get ready for work out of habit. Only then would she remember that there was nowhere else to go. She would lie down again, but sleep wouldn't return. Then she would go to the window and watch the life outside. Adults hurried to work, children to school, and she felt cast out of this stream, finding herself somewhere on the sidelines. "Don't talk nonsense," her old friend Carol would wave away her confessions. "Life only begins in retirement. Enjoy your well-deserved rest." Carol herself had retired a couple of years earlier, but she couldn't understand Eleanor at all. Carol had a husband, grown children, and most importantly, grandchildren, 5-year-old twins, Peter and Daisy. The parents worked, and the grandparents actively participated in raising the little ones. So Carol had a full life, someone to care for. How could she understand Eleanor's loneliness? Things somehow didn't work out with her own children. No matter how much she was treated, what doctors she consulted. Her husband, Arthur, the chief doctor of the local regional clinic, had the means to arrange a consultation with any medical luminary. Connections were available, but nothing helped. So the woman remained childless, both Eleanor herself and her husband. How many children in the world are unwanted by their parents? Over her years working at the school, Eleanor had seen plenty of such cases. The family might seem prosperous, the child dressed and shod like a picture, but you could still see those who lacked parental care and warmth. Eleanor and her husband would have been happy to raise Leo, make him happy, show him the world, raise him into a kind, good person, but the stork never came to their house. Eleanor took a long time to reconcile herself to the thought that she would not become a mother. She didn't give up immediately. She fought until the end, until her health began to fail. It was then, at the first alarming signals, her friend Carol, the one who, it seemed, would have a full set by the age of 100, didn't fully appreciate her happiness, as is often the case with those who are lucky. She took the gift from heaven for granted, and even complained to Eleanor periodically, sometimes about her lazy son, sometimes about her fashion-conscious daughter. And friends with children, if they wanted to, they went on a trip. If they wanted to, They lay around all day watching TV after a hard work week, no homework, children's clinics, endless clubs and sections. And yet Eleanor suffered. She wanted to give love and affection to a loved one who needed it, and she was afraid of lonely old age, because it would come someday, and there would be no one to even hand her a glass of water. And then somehow the realization came that everyone has their own destiny. Eleanor's was like this. Not the worst, to be honest. She had a loving husband, plenty in the house, a job she loved. It was to her work that she gave her heart and soul. There were always enough children at school who needed her help. Seeing such children, she tried to notice their problems, to support them in difficult situations. Some, besides her, had no one else to rely on in this life, and they were so vulnerable, so defenseless. The students' stories still surfaced in Eleanor's memory in minute detail. Here, for example, Connor Brown. Everyone turned away from him. The principal himself predicted the boy would soon end up in prison. Teachers refused to conduct lessons if he was in the class. Connor was bullied from all sides, and all he needed was a heart-to-heart talk with someone who would understand, who would pity him. Eleanor became that person. Connor had problems at home. His father drank, lashed out at the children, beat his wife. Eleanor understood that in such a family, Connor would perish. She used all her connections and arranged for the difficult but very intelligent boy to attend a cadet school. Boarding, strict discipline, all this did its job. Now Connor, who was considered a future criminal at school, holds a leadership position in the police, is married, happy, and quite prosperous. And he still doesn't forget to call his favorite teacher, visits her, and thanks her again for playing such an important role in his fate. Or Ivy Clark, a quiet, timid girl who couldn't even open her mouth at the blackboard. She got weak C's. They were given for her quiet, problem-free behavior. Little Ivy had a degree of cerebral palsy, so the girl stood out among her peers, walked a little awkwardly, her legs periodically cramped. Eleanor felt sorry for Ivy and started paying attention to her, and somehow they got talking. It turned out that Ivy was a person with a depth and understanding beyond her years, a little sage. Ivy confided her secret to Eleanor. She secretly wrote poetry but didn't show it to anyone. She was shy. Eleanor helped Ivy believe in herself and also introduced her to local poets. They appreciated the girl's talent from a professional point of view, took her under their wing and patronage. Now Ivy is the author of several books and the head of a literary circle at a local university. She found herself and no longer seems like that quiet and timid girl she used to be. Ivy is a real star. There were such happy stories in Eleanor's life. It wasn't always possible to help a child. Take Kate, for example. Kate Davis, a thin, tall girl with long hair the color of ripe rye, a real Russian beauty. Fair skin, bottomless blue eyes, regular, pleasant features. Kate. This little girl had serious problems in her family. Kate's father either died or ran away many years ago. The girl didn't even remember him. Since then, her mother dreamed of sorting out her personal life. She was a young, very striking woman, changing boyfriends like gloves, and it would be fine if she just changed them. She followed them all over the country and, of course, dragged her child along. Kate came to Eleanor's school in the 8th grade. She never stayed longer than a year and a half, all because of her mother's craving for adventure. Kate's mother worked as a hairdresser, a profession that allowed her to easily find a job in any city. Or she could work unofficially, freelancing at home, which the woman often did. Kate had to move to this city because of her mother's new suitor, another stepfather. He worked as a long-haul truck driver, met Kate's mother by chance in a bar. Well, and took her in. Eleanor noticed immediately that Kate was having a bad time at home. Her eye was trained. She had seen such children. She sensed their trouble. The teacher began to look more closely at the girl. Kate kept to herself. No one bullied her. No one teased her. But she didn't really talk to anyone either. She avoided conversations with the girls, tried not to participate in school-wide events. The girl stayed at school late. She would sit in the library, read something, do her homework, clearly delaying the moment of returning home. One day, Eleanor stayed late at school. A parent-teacher meeting unexpectedly dragged on. When everyone had left, it was already dark. Eleanor noticed a lone, hunched figure on a park bench in the schoolyard. The sensitive woman immediately understood. This person was clearly in trouble. She approached closer, looked carefully. Kate was sitting on the bench in the school garden. Seeing Eleanor, she was at first flustered, embarrassed. The teacher managed to get her to talk. She understood what the girl wanted to hear and feel. She saw. She needed the participation and sympathy of an adult, strong person. Kate spoke little at first. She was shy. And then somehow, little by little, she opened up, told Eleanor about her life. The teacher, who had seen a lot, learned something terrible. It turned out that her mother had more than once blamed her daughter for her failures in her personal life because, she claimed, it was difficult to find a good man with a child. And Kate's mother's men were varied. Some were indifferent, who didn't notice the girl at all. There were also aggressive, irritable ones. The current stepfather constantly picked on Kate. Everything she did, in his opinion, was wrong. He also yelled at her mother, sometimes even used his hands, especially when he had been drinking. Eleanor found out a terrible thing. Kate. She didn't want to go home. That's why she constantly stayed late in the library. And when it was warm, she would wander the streets until night or sit somewhere until the last minute, and only then return to the apartment. There was nowhere else to go. With an aggressive man and a constantly irritated mother, Kate felt that no one in her family needed her, that she was just in everyone's way, that everyone would be much better off without her. The girl poured out her soul to the teacher, and tears streamed down her cheeks at that moment. Eleanor hugged Kate, said something comforting, and was angry. Angry at Kate's mother. This woman didn't appreciate at all the gift fate had given her. Such a wonderful girl. Beautiful, subtle, capable. She didn't study very well, it's true. But it's no wonder. When could she do her homework if she tried to get home by the time everyone was already asleep, so as not to bother them? That's what she learned from her mother, not to run into rudeness or even punishment. And she became even more attentive to Kate. A warm, trusting relationship developed between them. Sometimes the girl would now go to the teacher's house after school. It was quiet, calm there. She could prepare for classes. Kate even improved her studies. Arthur, Eleanor's husband, was shocked. He initiated a check by the guardianship authorities. He thought maybe at least this instance would hold the negligent adults accountable, force them to start taking care of the child. But the check results showed that the family was quite prosperous. The apartment was renovated, the child had a separate sleeping place, the refrigerator was full of food. Eleanor choked on this lie, on the disconnect from the very sad reality. But what could it be? Kate didn't write poetry, couldn't sing, didn't want to dance. Needlework didn't appeal to her. Eleanor couldn't find what would help Kate stand firm. The girl needed strength to grow up into a normal person, to become strong, independent. Kate turned from an awkward girl into a pretty young woman. She still had no friends among her classmates, but she started talking to girls and boys from the college located near the school. Eleanor kept a close eye on her student. She feared that life circumstances would force her onto a slippery slope. The woman talked a lot with the girl, told her about the various dangers that teenagers face today. In essence, she was doing her mother's important work for her. "Katie," she would nod her head, promise not to do anything foolish, and thank Eleanor each time for her involvement. "You do more for me than my mother," Kate would sometimes say. "Nonsense," Eleanor would object. "Your mother feeds you, gives you drink, clothes you, and you warm my heart." Eleanor saw that Kate was drawn to her, that the girl listened to her opinion, and yet she worried about her very much. You never know? Katie was at such a difficult and dangerous age, and the only significant adult in her life was her history teacher. It shouldn't be like that. And then Kate disappeared. The evening before, she had visited Eleanor. The teacher was happy, invited her to the table. The girl had dinner with Eleanor. They talked a lot that evening, laughed. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. And only just before leaving, Kate suddenly handed Eleanor a locket. Inexpensive, but pretty. costume jewelry locket, silver-plated. "This is for you." "Thank you very much, what a lovely thing. But it's not a special occasion, is it?" "Just take it anyway." "Thank you, Kate." Kate left, and only then did Eleanor realize that the locket opened. Inside was a photograph of Kate. It was clear the picture had been taken recently. The girl was smiling cheerfully at the camera and looked like a model. A beauty. Eleanor was happy with the gift. She perceived it as a sign of attention, of care. A teacher, a subtle, sensitive girl. A grateful teenager is a rarity today. And yet, this gesture immediately struck Eleanor as strange and even alarming. And the next day, Kate was gone. She didn't show up at school, and she wasn't at home either. Her mother. But this time it was clear that something out of the ordinary had happened. Kate, being a minor, was immediately searched for. No joke. A 16-year-old teenager had disappeared. Posters were even put up around the city then. There were many theories about the girl's fate. Among them, it was said that she had become the victim of some visiting criminal. But Eleanor was sure Kate had simply run away, perhaps not even alone. The girl had known yesterday evening that she would leave, and this locket with the photo, that was her farewell gift. Eleanor told the investigator about this detail, but he didn't take her words into account. He dismissed them. The leading theory at the time was kidnapping. Kate was never found. Her mother, after met a new boyfriend and drove off with him into unknown distances. She, like Eleanor, was sure. Her daughter was alive. She had just run off somewhere because she didn't want to study and was forced to at home. She had found a boyfriend and was now enjoying life, youth, and freedom. Eleanor never heard from her student again, although she tried several times to find out her fate. She kept that very locket as a memento of the girl. It was now kept in her jewelry box. Sometimes Eleanor would take it out, open it, and gaze at Kate's cheerful, beautiful face. Where was this girl now, who was no longer a girl at all, but a grown woman? How had her fate turned out? For some reason, it seemed that nothing good could come of running away, that such a story could end well at all. Eleanor blamed herself. She blamed herself for not stopping Kate that evening, for not asking her more about her plans. After all, that unexpected gift had put the woman on alert. But the girl, she had looked quite happy then. Yes, truly happy. It was strange, but comforting. Eleanor thought that perhaps the girl's life had finally improved, because a joyful spark shone in her eyes. And look how it all turned out. "You can't save everyone," Arthur would reassure his wife. He saw how his wife was tormented by guilt. "I know for sure things like this happen in the hospital. Trouble, it just happens. Even if you did everything to prevent it, there's nothing you can do about it." Eleanor understood. Her husband was right. But she still tormented herself with thoughts of Kate. The worst thing was the uncertainty. She so wanted to believe that things had turned out well for this girl. But that was self-deception. What good could happen to a runaway teenager, unwanted by her parents? Arthur, her beloved husband, best friend, closest person, so intelligent and serious, so strict and responsible at work, so tender and kind with her, with Eleanor. They had been together since they were 20. They met at an amusement park as students, and they never parted since then, until death separated them 7 years ago. Arthur worked in a leadership position, chief doctor of the regional hospital, a stressful, responsible job. He was loved and respected for his professionalism. Arthur loved his work, and Eleanor understood him in this. She felt the same way about her own work. And so Arthur passed away right at his workplace from a sudden heart attack. So many doctors were nearby, and they couldn't save him. "Trouble just happens," Arthur had said once. And so it happened. Trouble. Eleanor fell into apathy. Perhaps only work pulled her out of it then. At school, whether you wanted to or not, you had to keep it together. Students and colleagues distracted Eleanor, gradually bringing her back to life. And then retirement. and Eleanor felt completely alone and unwanted. She hadn't imagined this time like this. They would travel. They had the money for it. Eleanor's husband was serious and responsible and had opened a savings account long ago. Money was accumulating there for their happy old age. Only Eleanor's old age didn't turn out to be so happy. 2 years after retirement passed in a mode of adapting to a new life. No notebooks, no school bells, no answers, no meetings in the principal's office, no New Year's corporate parties and cheerful school holidays. Eleanor thought about getting a dacha, doing some gardening, but she realized in time that she wouldn't be able to manage a plot alone. If Arthur had been there, that would be a different matter. Instead, the woman set up a real greenhouse in the living room. Flowers now stood not only on the windowsill, they were everywhere. Eleanor's personal home garden. There were even 2 small birch trees in tubs. The woman liked caring for the plants. They too, like children, need care, attention, and love. Eleanor stopped to catch her breath. Such walks were already difficult for her. The insidious disease was making itself known. And what would happen next? The doctors had made it clear. There are no miracles. Eleanor's condition would only worsen. How hard it was at such a moment not to have loved ones by her side. Eleanor's head sometimes ached before, so at first she didn't pay attention to the alarming symptoms. Her head would ache, she'd take a pill, and everything would be fine again. Then dizziness and nausea were added, and the migraine was making itself known every day, so the elderly woman went to the hospital. She was prescribed all the necessary procedures, tests, ultrasound, MRI. The verdict of the attending physician sounded like a bolt from the blue. Inoperable, rapidly progressing tumor. Nothing could be done. The only thing the doctors could do was relieve the pain. "And how much time do I have?" the woman asked, looking the doctor straight in the eye. "Tell me honestly and frankly. I have no one. I need to somehow finish all my affairs myself, you understand? I must know how much time I have." "Well, it's hard to say. It depends on how the disease behaves. I think at least a year. Maximum, well, in your case, no more than 2 years." A year. Only 2 summers, 2 New Years, 2 birthdays. That's in the best case. Only then did Eleanor realize how much she, it turned out, loved her life. Even such a life. Childless, lonely. She became scared. Truly scared. At first, she even had trouble falling asleep, she kept thinking about the approaching end. And so a year passed. The last months of Eleanor's stay on this earth began to flow. The woman had gotten used to this thought. It no longer frightened her so much. Eleanor knew, when things got really bad, she would go to a hospice, under the care of doctors. They would take care of her there. She only wished that moment would come as late as possible, because Eleanor had plants. Who would take care of them in her absence? And in general, lately the woman had especially valued life. She admired the white clouds. The warm sun made her happy. Even in these gray, leaden clouds that now covered the sky, she saw some special beauty, restrained and cold. Eleanor caught her breath and walked on. Her path led to the shop. She deliberately chose a supermarket further from home. To get there, she had to walk through the park. The weather, of course, wasn't conducive to walks, and it was already difficult for Eleanor to move around. But without this physical activity, her body might give out sooner than possible. Doctors recommended Eleanor daily walks, so she walked. Eleanor chose this time, rush hour. People returning from work walked quickly around her. Some still had to pop into the shop, some to the kindergarten for their child. They all seemed to live in some other time, hurrying, bustling. Eleanor, on the other hand, could afford to walk at a leisurely pace and admire the surrounding scenery. And yet, once, just like all this young people, she had hurried, rushed, hastened. And suddenly, Eleanor's attention was drawn to a hunched figure on a park bench. The sensitive woman immediately understood. This person was clearly in trouble. She approached closer, looked carefully. A very young woman was sitting on the bench, dark-skinned, black-eyed. Her clothes were old, cheap. In her arms she held a bundle. Such babies are usually discharged from the maternity hospital. She was rocking the bundle and crying. Yes, crying. Real tears streamed down her cheeks. No one noticed these tears. People hurried past on their business. They didn't even pay attention to the girl on the bench, and if someone had glanced at her, they still wouldn't have seen the tears. The stranger with the baby in her arms was sitting half-turned, with her back to the main path of the park. Perhaps she didn't want to be seen in such a state. Eleanor understood that now she definitely couldn't leave. The girl looked just over 20, and a baby in her arms. She couldn't just leave her in trouble. The elderly woman hesitated for a long time before speaking to the stranger. It felt awkward to bother people with questions. What if the girl took her attention the wrong way? But Eleanor saw no other way out for herself. "Hello," said the elderly woman, sitting down next to the girl on the bench. "Forgive my curiosity, but what has happened to you? Can I help you in any way?" The girl turned her tear-stained face towards Eleanor. Surprise was in her burning black eyes. She clearly hadn't expected anyone to show sympathy. "Thank you," the girl answered politely, "but I doubt you can help me with anything. My situation is completely hopeless." "That's not true," Eleanor countered. "There's always a way out. I'm telling you this from my many years. It's not true that there's no way out." Her companion Eleanor smiled warmly. "It is. I would tell you, but the story is very long and not very pretty. You're probably in a hurry?" "Well, if there's one thing I have plenty of, it's free time," Eleanor objected, "and I just love all sorts of life stories." "What time is it now?" The girl suddenly perked up. "Almost 6. The kindergarten is open until 7, so I still have an hour. If you have time, then listen." Sarah was born in a Romani camp. She and her mother were treated differently from others, dismissively. Sarah was punished in completely different ways. The girl always got more. As she got older, she understood what was going on. Her mother was a stranger here. 70 years ago, a young girl, almost still a child, ran away with her beloved to the camp. Sarah's grandmother, her father's mother, adored her granddaughter despite everything. Sarah was the only girl among the children of her grandmother's sons, long awaited. "Finally," the elderly woman would say, "the one has been born to whom I can pass on my gift." Grandmother never hurt Sarah. They often talked for a long time, walked together through the meadows and steppes where the camp was staying at that time. Grandmother showed her granddaughter medicinal plants, told her about their power, and often held the girl's hand. During this time, Sarah felt some warmth transferring from grandmother to her. The Romani people said that this was how old Valentina was passing on her gift to the girl, little by little. They didn't like that the priceless gift was being received by a stranger. Yes, Sarah was called a stranger in the camp, and this was despite the fact that she had lived among these people since birth. It goes without saying that the attitude towards the girl's mother was much cooler. Sarah remembered her mother as a silent and indifferent to everything beautiful woman. Her father, having brought her down to the camp, quickly grew cold towards his beloved. And the pressure from the people also played a role. He had long since acquired a new wife, who bore him 3 sons, one after another. And Sarah and her mother lived with grandmother. Valentina loved her granddaughter and spent a lot of time with her, but she treated Sarah's mother more like a servant, a silent one. At least the old woman didn't pity her daughter-in-law. Sarah always, as long as she could remember, felt pity for her mother. Even as a small child, she understood. Something had broken this beautiful, still very young woman. Some external circumstances had turned her into such a weak-willed, indifferent person. Mother. Not even her own daughter concerned her. She was always in some world of her own, like an enchanted princess. She performed grandmother's errands like a robot, mechanically. She spoke little, only when necessary. And she never hugged Sarah. And she so wanted to feel her mother's embrace, to see tenderness and love in her eyes, or at least interest. Grandmother didn't love mother, but this feeling wasn't the main one. Valentina gave her a roof over her head, food, clothes, and grandmother tried to cure mother, to bring her back to a full life. Sarah saw this with her own eyes. Valentina gave the young woman some decoctions, read strange incantations over her. The girl so hoped it would work, but mother remained the same, cold, indifferent, aloof. "My strength isn't enough to cope with this," grandmother would sometimes lament. Deep, deep in her soul sits sorrow, longing. No one ever loved her. That's terrible, you understand? It cripples the soul. That's why your mother couldn't bear it. "But I love her," Sarah would exclaim. That's what gives hope. Perhaps not all is lost yet. And also, grandmother sees your gift. A little more, and when it fully passes to Sarah, it will bloom with new strength. You will be stronger than me. The old woman smiled, stroking her granddaughter's hair. They, all these Romani people who don't accept you now, will fawn before you. They will even beg you to save them or their children from illnesses. Many things can be fixed with herbs and decoctions using different skills. Only use the gift in truly serious cases. It's not a toy. You'll understand when you grow up. And then, one day, when Sarah was only 11 years old, her mother suddenly took to bed. She was as quiet, emotionless, and absent as always. She lay in bed for a week, the bed that served her, and didn't get up in the morning. She lay quiet, pale, detached, and breathing very heavily. Grandmother became worried, took out her potions and old books, and sent Sarah outside. The girl sat near the wagon, leaning her back against the wall, and prayed to all powers that grandmother would manage to pull mother through. But some inner feeling told her it wouldn't work. And so it was. Sarah sat outside for about 3 hours. And then grandmother came out to her. From her sad face, the girl understood everything immediately. Mother was no more. Sarah took the loss hard. Yes, mother had never shown any feelings towards her daughter, but still, even her presence gave Sarah strength. And most importantly, hope always lived in the girl's heart. Hope that someday everything would be different. Mother would awaken from her stupor. The spell would break. She would smile at her daughter, hug her, and a completely different life would begin. Happy, bright, warm. Grandmother supported her granddaughter as best she could and tried to understand what the child was feeling at that moment. 2 years passed. And then one morning, Valentina sat Sarah down in front of her, having first warned her that they would have a serious talk. "I had a dream today," grandmother began. "A difficult dream. I understood that I will soon be gone." "No, grandmother," Sarah exclaimed. After her mother's death, her most terrible fear had become losing grandmother, because then she would be completely alone. Her father had completely forgotten about her existence, living with his new family. The other Romani people didn't accept Sarah either, only grandmother. Only she in the whole world truly loved Sarah. Let grandmother stop saying such terrible words. "Sarah, you must understand. It has to be this way. That's how it is. Give me your hand. I will pass my gift to you completely. I don't need it anymore." Sarah obediently extended her palm to grandmother. She squeezed it with her dry, thin hand, and the girl felt the familiar warmth as if flowing from grandmother to her. A pleasant feeling. But this time it was scary. Grandmother was never wrong, and she was probably telling the truth now too. "How will I be without you?" "I know, dear. You are scared." Grandmother stroked her granddaughter's head. She looked at her with inexpressible sadness. It was clear that grandmother also didn't want to leave the girl without her support. Without her, Sarah was very weak and vulnerable. "They never accepted you here. Listen carefully. When I am gone, leave the camp. Otherwise, they will make a servant out of you, wear you out with physical labor. Your gift must serve good people. It was given to you for that, to save people. So as soon as I am gone, go. At night. It will be warm, good, easy to get to the city, any city that happens to be nearby at that moment. Ask people where the shelter, the orphanage is, and go there yourself. Ask for a child. They won't refuse. You will be among strangers, but at least warm and fed. You will grow up, become strong. Sarah looked closely at grandmother, searching for signs of illness, but she looked as usual, cheerful, lively, quick. The girl began to think that grandmother was mistaken, or that the terrible thing that was to happen would not happen any time soon. But one morning grandmother didn't get up from her bed as usual. Sarah, already knowing what was wrong, slowly approached her loved one and made sure that grandmother was no longer here, but somewhere very, very far away. Only her body remained here. The girl cried loudly. She cried for a long time, shuddering convulsively and twitching her shoulders. But after that, she felt a little better inside. Then Sarah sat down right on the floor near grandmother's bed and thought hard. Grandmother is gone. I need to leave. And it's better to do it right now, before any of the adults find out and stop her. Sarah understood. They didn't love her here because she was a stranger. Some were even hostile towards her. People were only restrained by grandmother, who had great authority in the camp. She helped the Romani people get rid of toothaches, calmed migraines. Because of this, they tolerated her granddaughter. But now Sarah had no protector. So it was time to follow grandmother's advice, to run away from the camp wherever her eyes led her. Sarah knew. The city was not far. They had driven past a nice, cozy little town the evening before. Sarah admired its lights, the distant towers and tall buildings. Not a metropolis, but not a tiny town either. There was definitely an orphanage there, and more than one. So, Sarah was going there. The girl quickly packed her few belongings into a backpack and, unnoticed by anyone, left the camp. She walked for a long time along a country road among wide fields, trudging towards the city. The unknown both frightened and fascinated her. Tears streamed down the girl's cheeks from the abundance of emotions. She didn't even wipe them away. No one was watching anyway. To herself, Sarah seemed tiny, insignificant, weak. But the girl knew. Somewhere inside her sat a strong gift. It wouldn't let her perish. It would help her in a difficult situation. Finally, the girl reached the city, asked people for directions to the orphanage, found the institution, opened the door, and asked to be taken to the director. A strict lady in glasses listened carefully to the girl's story. It was a pre-prepared legend, which, however, contained a grain of truth. Sarah said that she was born and grew up in a camp. She didn't specify that she was only half Romani. And then her parents died. The Romani people turned the girl into a servant. Another adult widower threatened to take her as his wife. In short, Sarah ran away from such a difficult life. She chose her own path, a different one. She no longer wanted to live in the camp, but dreamed of studying, getting a profession. It was difficult, but somehow Sarah was registered. She got the necessary documents. The girl took a long time to get used to her new life. Everything was different here. It was confusing. High beds instead of sleeping mats, clean, ironed bed linen, different clothes, different food, a strict daily routine, studying. Sarah liked studying. She had a lot to catch up on, so the girl dedicated herself. At first, even here, Sarah was treated like a stranger. Of course, her exotic appearance, unusual story. But it wasn't contempt and alienation, like in the camp. Sarah aroused interest. In the first few months of her stay in the orphanage, she had to tell her story several dozen times. She even became a local celebrity. Then, life settled into its routine. Sarah finished 9 grades, studied to be a commodity expert, came of age, and graduated from the orphanage. She received a small apartment from the state as an orphan and got a job. Not in her profession, though. Experience was needed there. And where could a recent college graduate get that? She stood behind the cash register in a supermarket. The pay wasn't bad, at least. In short, Sarah felt quite happy and, most importantly, normal, not a second-class person, as in the camp, a fully fledged person. The girl now perceived her past life as some kind of fairy tale. Much of what had happened to her then seemed like fiction, fantasy. For example, that grandmother's gift, which she supposedly passed on to her granddaughter. Time passed, and this superpower never manifested itself. So Sarah decided that she had imagined it all. It didn't happen. That's all there was to it. One day, the supermarket where Sarah worked was undergoing renovations, and the employees, who were temporarily unable to serve customers, had to take turns watching the workers. During one of her shifts, Sarah met a handsome young man, tall, lean, athletic, fair hair, light blue eyes, a beautiful gaze, an open smile. This young man immediately showed sympathy for the young cashier, winked at her cheerfully. The girl smiled back, showing that she was not at all against getting acquainted. Young men had approached her before. Sarah had an interesting and striking appearance and knew it perfectly well. But things never went beyond a couple of dates. These suitors disappointed the girl. But with Andrew, everything turned out completely differently. Somehow, from the first glance, a strong and very warm feeling began to develop between them. Sarah understood this immediately. They didn't date for long. After a few dates, they decided to live together in Sarah's apartment. Andrew was not from the area. He was born in a village with a large family. Well, and now he worked on a construction site, toiling away. He dreamed of a house, not an apartment, and for now he was living in rented accommodation. Andrew immediately took on all the men's work around the house. He glued the wallpaper, fixed the long crooked curtain rod, repaired the wardrobe. And it also turned out that he cooked wonderfully. In fact, it seemed there was nothing Andrew couldn't do. His life was such that he had to learn everything. They were good together, warm, cozy. The young people understood each other with half a word, and sometimes no words were needed. Finally, Sarah felt happy and loved. She hadn't even dreamed of such a relationship. Andrew and Sarah got married, and soon after, the young wife realized she was pregnant. The joy of the future parents knew no bounds. They were not afraid that their responsibilities would soon increase. Everything was great for them. They had a roof over their heads. They didn't complain about their income, as Andrew earned well at his construction job. Their son Theodore, the firstborn, was born. Andrew chose his name. It was his grandfather's name, a kind and hard-working man. A year and a half later, their daughter Catherine was born. Sarah named her after her mother. The chores of caring for the little ones, the household tasks, all this brought joy and truly captivated Sarah. She enjoyed the role of wife and mother. Yes, sometimes it was difficult, but it was all for her loved ones, for her husband, the reliable, caring Andrew, for Theo and Katie, so sweet and funny. The little ones started kindergarten, and things got a little easier. Sarah started getting ready for work, decided to leave her second maternity leave a little earlier. The couple had ambitious plans. Both dreamed of expanding, turning their one-bedroom apartment into a 2 or even 3-bedroom. And only then could they think about a house, more space, and besides, a large family was already a bit cramped in one room. And then Sarah realized she was expecting another child. This time she was scared. They hadn't planned on becoming a large family so soon, and besides, it wasn't the right time. Andrew supported her, calmed her down, assured her that everything would be fine. "I'll just work more, that's all. There are plenty of opportunities for extra work on the construction site." Trouble struck when Sarah was in the last month before the birth of her youngest daughter. There was only a little time left. That morning she didn't want to let her husband go to work. An unclear premonition of trouble gnawed at her. Sarah chased away the bad thoughts, attributing everything to her condition. After all, she was due soon. And just 2 hours later, Sarah received a call with the terrible news. Andrew had been crushed by a concrete block at the construction site. Of course, they couldn't save him. Sarah sobbed, howled like a wounded animal. Fortunately, the children were at kindergarten, so she could let her feelings out. The woman cursed fate, which had once again treated her so cruelly, calling Andrew back. And then somehow she suddenly felt his presence. It was inexplicable. She just knew that Andrew was here. He saw her, wanted to comfort her but couldn't. and it hurt him. Sarah pulled herself together, said aloud that she loved Andrew very much, realizing that she would no longer have the opportunity to be heard by him, and also that she understood perfectly. She now needed to be strong, brave for their children. "You can rest assured about us. I'll manage." And Sarah tried. She tried very hard to be strong, although sometimes it was simply unbearable. Due to stress, labor started prematurely. The children had to be left with neighbors. Where else could she put them? The original plan was for Andrew to take time off while Sarah was in the maternity hospital, but fate had twisted everything like this. The girl was born small, but strong and viable. Sarah named her Ivy. That's what Andrew had wanted, and the young woman was left with 3 small children, without any support. Sarah applied for all possible benefits, but the money was still not enough. The children grew quickly, constantly needing new clothes and shoes. And also, they were often sick. She had to spend astronomical sums at pharmacies. But what could she do? Health comes first. This is where her gift would have been useful. If only she could rid her little ones of these endless colds and tonsillitis. But the gift was dormant. Or perhaps it wasn't there at all, no gift. Money was very scarce, and Sarah took a step that later seemed like a fatal mistake. She took out a loan. The money, so necessary for the family, was in her hands instantly. Sarah bought food, medicine, updated the children's wardrobe, but the amount had to be repaid with high interest. At first, Sarah paid the debt regularly, but then the children got sick again. She had to pay a fortune for treatment, and Sarah missed a payment. As a result, she was put on a meter. The debt began to grow at a frantic pace. This was a common scheme. Sarah wasn't the only one who fell into this trap. In short, debt collectors started bothering the young woman. Sarah couldn't go back to work. Little Ivy was still too young. She couldn't even be left for a couple of hours to clean the staircase, for example. In short, Sarah lost her apartment. It was taken for debts, as the woman had taken the loan against the property. Sarah clutched her head. Where could she go with 3 little ones? What had she done? Neighbors advised her to register at a special shelter. She could live there for about 3 months. People are given time to find a job, to somehow get settled in life. But what was Sarah to do? Who would hire a woman with 3 children, one of whom was an infant? And how could she work if she couldn't leave Ivy with anyone, and the older ones were constantly getting sick and couldn't attend kindergarten? Well, that's my whole story. In a week, I, of course, couldn't find either a job or an apartment. How could I? I have little Ivy. Where would she go? And what now? The former teacher gasped. Sarah's story was simply incredible, sometimes even resembling a fairy tale. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life. And the young woman with 3 little ones truly had nowhere to go. "How terrible," Sarah said, and started crying again, quietly, unnoticed. But Eleanor, of course, saw everything and perfectly understood the desperate situation the young woman was in. "They'll take them to a shelter. They'll grow up in state institutions like I did, only with a living mother who is so worthless that she can't provide them with normal living conditions." "Here's what," the old woman said decisively. "Move in with me." It was a strange, risky offer, to invite an unknown family into her home. Eleanor knew that her neighbors and acquaintances would condemn her, but she didn't care. Sarah and her children needed help. If she didn't reach out now, the little ones would go to a shelter, and their mother straight onto the street. 4 broken lives. Eleanor had nothing. She was living out her days. And Eleanor would do this, even at risk to herself. What was there to lose? Sarah didn't believe her ears at first. "And your relatives? Won't they be against it?" "I don't have anyone." Eleanor placed her hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Let's go to the kindergarten for your little ones. Then we'll stop by the shop. We need to buy something for dinner. I have guests now." Eleanor became happier each day about that chance meeting with the young woman in the park. Sarah turned out to be a very pleasant and kind person, hard-working, grateful, sensitive, and her children. Eleanor's heart melted with tenderness when she watched them. Serious, thoughtful Theodore, chatterbox Katie, plump, bright little Ivy. Eleanor baked them pancakes and pies, feeling like a grandmother. This feeling was so pleasant, words couldn't describe it. Eleanor and Sarah often had heart-to-heart talks. They both needed this warmth, care, attention, the absence of the feeling of total loneliness and uselessness. Complete strangers in just a few weeks. So she had to tell Sarah about her diagnosis. "If only I had that gift," she shook her head bitterly. Time passed. Eleanor's condition worsened. This was natural, and the doctors had warned her right away. That's how it happens. It was time to move to the hospice, under the care of medics. Sarah saw Eleanor off with tears in her eyes, everything in the ambulance. Although the elderly woman had tried to dissuade her from this troublesome step, she still had to return home with tiny little Ivy in her arms. Eleanor had taken care of Sarah in advance. She had signed over the apartment to her. The neighbors, of course, gossiped. "She'll kill you," instead of grabbing the apartment for herself quickly. "She'll poison you or figure something else out." But Eleanor was sure about Sarah. You couldn't fake that. The elderly woman was good at reading people. Sarah was truly attached to her and was very afraid of losing her. Sarah herself had said this many times and even cried. "What is this? Why do all my loved ones leave? Why am I always left alone in the end?" Sarah, upon learning of Eleanor's terrible diagnosis, broke down and sobbed, quite sincerely. Eleanor comforted her, promised that everything would be all right. Sarah later apologized to her for her weakness. The hospice was quiet, calm, cozy, friendly doctors, high doses of medication to relieve pain and seizures. Eleanor spent her time in a semi-conscious state. Her head felt light. Her soul was calm. Sarah visited her often, placed her palm on her forehead, looked attentively, straight into her eyes. After she left, Eleanor felt better, more cheerful, somehow stronger. Probably from the feeling that someone needed her, someone worried about her, cared for her. Several weeks passed. To her surprise, Eleanor felt better. She even had the strength for walks in the hospital garden. Again, she admired the flowers, the bright blue sky, enjoying this farewell gift of fate to the fullest. She might not have another such improvement in her condition. The tests, strangely enough, also got better. The doctors were surprised, but said that this sometimes happens, a calm before the decisive strike. Eleanor suddenly had a strong desire to visit home one more time, to see Sarah and her little ones, to breathe in the familiar scent of her apartment, to take something from there as a memento. The locket, the one Kate had given her many years ago, a memorable item with a story. It would be good to have it with her here, in the hospice, as a reminder of home, of her past life. Eleanor asked the doctor for permission. He gave the okay for the trip home. Eleanor called a taxi and went. It was so amazing. She hadn't thought she would ever leave the hospice walls alive. This wasn't a recovery, of course, not a deliverance from the illness. But not to feel pain, to be able to go wherever her soul desired. She felt strength in her legs and arms, and a pleasant lightness throughout her body. Eleanor opened the door with her key. The apartment was quiet and empty. It was clear. Sarah was out for a walk with Ivy. The older children were at kindergarten. Eleanor walked through the familiar rooms, touched her favorite things. The rocking chair, the teddy bear Arthur had won for her at the shooting range once, the soft blanket. Here was the bedside table with the drawer where the jewelry was kept. Eleanor wasn't interested in the expensive chains and rings. She came for that very locket. The elderly woman found the desired item, opened the locket, and admired Kate's cheerful face. Where is she now? Then she heard a sound. Eleanor hurried to meet her. You're home, Sarah gasped. She sat little Ivy down and came over to Eleanor. Joy and surprise were in Sarah's eyes. Yes, well, I felt better. They let me come home for a little while. Better? Sarah smiled. Really? Did it actually work? Did what work? Eleanor didn't understand. It's all my gift, you see. I was worried about you. I didn't want to lose another loved one. I've already had so many losses in my life. While the children weren't watching, I even cried. And one day, I had a dream. My grandmother, Valentina the Romani woman, she strictly told me that I must stop crying, that now was the time to show my gift. Yes, grandmother said it would be difficult, and it cost her a lot of effort, and it would all be in vain if I didn't pull you through. And I did it. I awakened the power within me. I think grandmother helped too. Eleanor blinked in confusion. Well, I'll be. Is that really true? And then she remembered how light she felt each time after Sarah's visits, how warm her hands were. Not just warm. Eleanor had thought even then that she was just imagining it because of her illness. What did the doctor say? Sarah seemed not to fully believe in this miracle herself yet. Well, they said the tests improved, but it could just be the calm before the storm. There won't be any storm, Sarah smiled broadly and then hugged Eleanor tightly. The storm is canceled. My gift has awakened. It awakened so I could save you, you see? You don't believe it? You'll see. Everything will be fine. Now Sarah clapped her hands together from the overflow of emotion. Her coal-black eyes shone with joy. Little Ivy didn't understand anything, but she sensed that something good was happening, and she smiled too, just like her mother. Oh, what's that in your hands? Sarah finally noticed the locket. What an interesting thing. I feel it has some special energy, warm, good. This is a gift from one of my students. A former one, of course. It was a long time ago. Eleanor still couldn't quite process what Sarah had said. Does this mean the imminent end is canceled? She'll live longer? And now she wanted to live particularly much. And there were the little ones, who loved her so much and needed her so much. She wanted to see them grow up, mature. She wanted to support them on their difficult life path. Life is indeed so difficult. People need help, support, understanding, love. Meanwhile, Sarah was turning the locket over in her hands. Something about it really caught her attention. Finally, she used her fingernail to pry open the lid. A gasp of surprise escaped her. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. It's my mother, the woman finally said, pointing at Kate's photo. She's younger here, but it's definitely her. I recognized her. It can't be. Eleanor hadn't recovered from one shock when another struck. It just doesn't happen like that. It does, it turns out. It's definitely Mom. Her eyes, her lips, her nose. I remember her face in minute detail. What was your mother's name? Kate. I named my oldest daughter after her. Of course. How did I not realize right away? And my student's name was Kate. She disappeared when she was a teenager. I didn't help her. I didn't understand in time. She ran away to a Romani camp with a Romani man. And then she gave birth to you. Incredible. I couldn't help Kate, but I helped her daughter. And you. You in turn saved me. All this still needed to be processed, but at that very moment, Eleanor somehow became completely convinced that the illness had retreated and that she now had life.